Hey folks, welcome to the Generational Gap. I am Robert, your resident Gen Xer, and right over there, sitting right
Right.
there beside me, is our resident millennial, John. John, how are you doing tonight?
Fantastic,
Wow, that's
as always.
exciting. That's exciting.
Yeah.
It's good to see you're fantastic. Have you had an exciting week this week?
Um, Had a pretty busy week, yeah, with work and whatnot. Working a lot. So I'll be happy with the paycheck though.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Everybody should be
Yes,
happy
yeah.
with the paycheck. Hey, folks, welcome to our Friday night show. If you like what you're hearing, hit the like button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. It's right down there. It's right down there by all those fun links and descriptions and things that we've got. 2 clicks.
Yeah.
So it's just 2 clicks. 2 clicks and call me in the morning. Well, don't call me because I won't answer, but 2 clicks, and it's that simple.
Wow.
Uh, can they call you, John? Would it be better?
No,
No. All right, don't call,
no.
but please click.
Don't
We
call.
like clicks. We like it when you tell your friends to click. We like it when you invite your
Yes.
friends to come and see us and like and subscribe and be our friends because friends make conversations more fun. Unless it's John.
And as we know, friendship is magic.
Friendship is next to godliness, John.
That's true. That's what I heard.
Wait,
Nope. Friendship.
is it clean friends are next to God? I forget how.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense.
So,
So,
hey, I think, John, that if you will
oh,
take a moment and think very
moment
hard,
of silence.
we've got some things coming up.
Yes, we
And I
do.
want to make sure that we're making sure that the word is out there. So what do you
That's
got
right.
coming up, John? What do we got going on?
Yes, Friday, August 30th, we have Blonde from the Beauty and the Beta podcast and Blonde in the Belly of the Beast channel as a guest, so that'll be freaking amazing. Make sure you're there for that. And then Halloween, we're going to be having our Halloween spooktacular, and I'm going to keep saying it that way because Robert hates that word,
Only because
spooktacular.
you're appropriating it from Disney.
Everyone calls things spooktaculars. I mean, that's not unique to Disney. But we'll be having our very own spooktacular.
Conformist.
Yeah. And then Friday, December 6th, we're doing a 12-hour live stream for charity so we can give some toys to those kids who may not otherwise get any. So definitely be there for that. We're going to try and set up some debates. We're going to try and get some guests on our usual Freedom Scoop group. And we're going to have try and get some more of our higher profile guests that we've had on the past. But we'll see what happens with that.
Nothing is unique to Disney. No, of course not.
Yes,
Welcome to
Midget B coming
What's
in
up, Midget B?
with the words of wisdom there.
Um,
Yeah.
Before Disney, that actually is perfect because that's a great launching point. But before I do, I just want to point out, hey, I was on Stephen Ignoramus' show today. Well, not on it, but watching it.
Right.
It was a good show. A lot of good chat interaction, the whole 9 yards. He was talking about fun things, Israel and assorted things like that. But then tonight, I don't know if you caught any of it. He had Michael Autry on. Do you remember Michael? He was on our
Yeah.
show for a
Yeah.
little bit talking about the Constitution. But
Indeed.
I just wanted to throw a shout out there to Stephen Ignoramus, keeping it real, doing it hard, making them shows come out. One of our Freedom Scoop boys. Ooh, Freedom Scoop,
Yep.
Freedom Scoop. Oh, we gotta do there's our thing. Freedom Scoop.
Oh God.
I like that. We gotta do that. Get that. We'll be
We got to
like
get in the huddle first.
we'll be like Freedom Scoop Marines. There we go.
Wow.
Okay.
So anyway, also another little announcement though
Oh,
is
yeah.
that we are at 97 subscribers now. We're
97,
almost broken our first 100.
We almost 100.
Almost.
Almost
So-
100.
It's more important now than it ever has been in the history of this show for you to share it with your friends and family. Maybe. Probably not your family.
You know
You're
what would be
shitty anyway.
really cool and super creepy?
What would that be?
Is that if our 100th subscriber clicked the subscribe button and in whatever room they were in, suddenly music started playing, horns started blowing, and balloons started falling down from the ceiling.
That would be fucking awesome.
And super creepy, right? What the?
Just be like, what?
I could imagine. All right, so listen. Disney makes me It triggers me about this topic that I want to discuss real quick before we go into the show, because we're going to be talking about entitlements tonight, and how we may have come to the conclusion that with much of the population out there, entitlements have become their new rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically to that extent. But this topic that I'm going to talk about ties in with it. Now, this one is kind of personal to me. There are a lot of people out there that share my viewpoint, but again, remember, we're dealing with a very specific audience here. It's in regards to a series of books I've read by Robert Jordan. It's the Wheel of Time saga. It's 14 books, a couple plus a prequel. Very long series. A series of books that took him that took almost 23 years to complete. So long to complete that the last 3 books had to be completed by Brandon Sanderson, because Robert Jordan died before he could finish it. Though he had written enough notes that Brandon Sanderson was able to pick it up, but wasn't able to finish it in 1 book, had to finish it in 3 books. Okay, so this is an epic saga, amazing, right? People that read it have been invested in this thing for a long time, very devout followers, myself included. 14 books in the series, and I've read the entire series probably 6 times or more.
That's ridiculous.
They're just that good to me. It's very Tolkien-like in its depth and scope. Okay.
Isn't one of your tattoos from that series?
Yes, I do have a tattoo right there, and it says "Dovende Setovia Sagan," and it means time to toss the dice, as spoken in the old tongue.
Nerd.
Okay, so hold on, Midget. Does that mean you are aware of the Wheel of Time?
He's probably aware of the news at the very least.
Well, possibly. So he is aware of the news. So now, John, I'm going to give you a scenario. You have a story that's set in not our medieval times, but set in a medieval atmosphere. Okay,
in a fantasy
medieval atmosphere, right? You've got swords, magic, archery, horses, carriages, these kind of things, and the whole shebang, right? In cities, in a big city, you would expect a lot of multicultural things going on, right? There's multiple countries in this world. There's, but the main core group of people, the main cast, it's 5 people. Actually 7, but 2 are from out of town, as it were. But the hardcore group is 5 people, and they all come from a little tiny, tiny, tiny village, to where, like, the furthest the characters have been from their own village is Devon Ride, which is a half a day's ride away. So it's very small, right? The kind of thing the main trader comes through once a year.
Yeah.
Okay. I've read these books multiple times, and I will preface by saying I am not racist. I am not
exactly
anti-ethnic.
Would say.
I'm none of these things. I'm going strictly on what I've read and what I've put together, and the book art, everything involved with it. What would you expect the race of these 5 kids to be in that kind of setting?
I don't know, probably all the same, whichever one they are, depending on the setting.
One of which is like a 6.5 foot tall ginger. Okay, they're all, you have this perception that they're all just normal, for want of a better term, white folks. Well, Amazon is
that's just your white sensibilities.
Sure, I get it, but we're talking, they have light eyes, blue eyes, this, that, and the other. I mean, we start to put the correlations together.
Sure.
And then there's other things throughout the book where they go other places out in the world, and they see people with darker skin. They see people with different shaped faces, eyes, things like this. So you can see that there's ethnic/racial differences in people from other parts of the world. Okay, so these books have all been made, and now Amazon has picked it up. Amazon is going to make a series out of it. I have been waiting 23 years plus, because these finished 6 years ago. So 30 years since I've been reading these books and waiting for this, right? There's been so much talk over the last 2 decades of doing it. Well, Amazon is going to do it. They've got the writers in place. I've been following them on Twitter somewhat. They started casting.
Yep.
They started casting, John. And they cast the 5 core characters. And out of the 5 core characters, 4 of them are people of color. Now,
Oh no.
now I'm not saying this is I'm not trying to screw things up here. I'm not trying to say that people can't be actors. I'm not saying any of these things. But when you take the main character of a story, who is very specifically 6.5 foot tall with red hair and pale skin, and you put a mixed race Hispanic with brunette hair in the role, I begin to have a problem, John, with what you're doing to my book.
Yeah, and this is what I was trying to warn you about before.
John, I'm fucking triggered right now. This has pissed me off. And what was worse was not that they did this. Not that they did this. What was worse, and Midget, remember, I have never disagreed that what Disney has done with their stuff in the same way is completely irrational and not acceptable, but this is more personal. I went on Twitter. I went into the cancer, and I watched these people. No. I watched
into the cancer.
I watched these people who claim to be devout followers of this saga, invested in it, saying, I think the casting is perfect. That's exactly how I pictured these people. You fucking liars! You're liars! You did not picture a mixed race boy with brown hair when they told you that the main character is a 6.5 foot tall ginger. He comes from a race of red-headed people. And then everyone that spoke out against the casting choices was called a racist. You are racist. You are racist. You're racist. The books never say anything. Yes, they do. They do. It's got me worked up, John, because before it is even ready to hit my screen, they've already started destroying what Robert Jordan built. Because I can promise you that Robert Jordan wasn't sitting around 20, 30 years ago writing this book and thinking, I need to make sure that I describe these things in a way that will leave it open for equality and PC, political correctness, if they ever decide to make it a movie. No. Now, my good friend, Josh, who you met last week, I talked with him about it. Same thing. And he's like, the one problem Robert Jordan ever had was being descriptive. Right? Because so descriptive that, like, most of the people who've read the series look at the middle, like 3 books right in the middle of the series and go, he didn't even need to write that. As Josh says, it's just 3 books of tea sipping and skirt twitching. Right?
Yeah. I feel like Lord of the Rings was like that, too.
Yes.
It's just way too much description. Way too much, yeah.
So when I say that these casting choices that they've made are totally off base from the books, I'm not wrong here.
No.
And anybody that sits around and wants to just fuck you. That's not what you pictured. It's not. I mean, it's just not. And it really irks me. Like I said, I've had the same, I've had this issue with Disney. I can't believe that they're going to do The Little Mermaid.
Aw, apparently Rachel feels bad for you. Midget B's wife feels bad for you. It's true. I mean, there is that one moment when the fandom that you really care about is then just infected with SJW nonsense and then just ruined.
I've invested 3.
Right now, I felt with Star Wars.
Right. I felt much the same way with Star Wars. Star Wars was an excellent example. Now, the only difference for me with Star Wars was, Like, okay, so for instance, the characters in Star Wars, you're not surprised by because were those really taken from specific books, or and they just twisted what completely what the books were, or were those
No, usually
fresh scripts?
the books were written parallel to the
Okay,
movies.
gotcha.
For the new
These weren't off
trilogy,
old, right?
there's no. In fact, they just threw out all the expanded universe that already existed,
Right.
and said we're not going to go with that. We're going to go with our own thing. Even though there's like hundreds of like books that you can use as reference material to, you can just pull stories directly from there. Less work
Right.
included and
Right.
more fan. Like,
But
I don't
instead,
understand the choice.
but instead, you've got to make you've got to do a three-stage feminist movement, right?
Hmm.
A very PC environment in a very brutal, warlike environment, world, right?
Hmm.
Universe. I mean, it's this. It's look.
And there's plenty of diversity already in Star Wars. I mean, the biggest, most important admiral in the Empire's fleet is blue. He's a
Right.
Chiss. He's Admiral Thrawn. I mean, that's diverse as fuck.
Right. And
I
and
mean, how many
and
blue people do any other movies have?
And,
Not
and
many.
right, and in the books, there's very specific things. Like one of the main characters, the one who this tattoo comes from, and I will say is the only non-person of color out of the five that they cast. Um, Matrim, he eventually meets someone who is a short, very dark-skinned girl. And it is this exoticness about her that kind of draws him to her, right? She's
Hmm.
got a very exotic look and everything. Well, now you can't have that because two of the people in his village that he's growing up with are dark skinned, It's like, so this is not going to be new. These are not, it's like taking out
Yeah.
these new experiences as they, that was what was beautiful about it. They were going out and they were experiencing these new things, new ethnicities, new cultures, new races, things like this. It was completely, but now it's like this little village where everyone knows everybody. There's just a couple of hundred people in this little village at best. Now suddenly you've got this very diverse culture that are all supposed to be of one single bloodline coming from an ancient kingdom that used to exist
Hmm.
just right down the street from them, basically. And it was,
Yep.
it's like, okay, you're supposed to be the blood of these people, but here you are, this multicultural, this fucking diversity that shouldn't be there. And that is that's wrong.
Yeah.
It's wrong to me to do that just to push a narrative, just to suit an agenda.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I'm afraid that this is going to be the first step to ruining it for me. I mean, of course, I'm going to invest in watching it because maybe these kids will be good actors, and I can ignore that part of it if the writing is good. But I don't know. I hate it when
Yeah.
something's not even out of the gate yet, and they've already started fucking with it. With the snowflakes have already started getting their hooks into it and started
Yep.
fucking with it. And I can promise you, never, never would Robert Jordan have accepted it. This will make him roll over in his grave.
Yep.
Oh, and you know where Robert Jordan's from?
Where?
Was it South Carolina? North Carolina?
You don't even know.
It's one of the two Carolinas. I get them confused. You down in your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
So I don't know what his racial proclivities were as far as how he saw race, but I know how he described these people.
Yeah.
I know how he
Accurately,
yeah,
probably.
yeah, and it's not what they've cast, and I don't know. It's let me down. So that being the
Yeah. Well,
case,
one of the worst offenders I've ever seen is the Aragon movie. That one was just
now
absolutely
tell
fucking
me how
ridiculous.
did they what kind of did they do something similar to that?
Not in the way of putting like forced diversity in it. It was more of just like the shittiest writing ever. It's like the writers of the script got a hold of like not even got a hold of Cliff Notes. It was like someone kind of told them the basis of what it was like as if I explained it to someone, and they were just like, oh, okay, and then they kind of wrote it down from their memory from that. It was just absolutely ridiculous. So they got not only did they get like shitloads of things wrong, but the pacing was so fast that like there was no room for these major discoveries and things that would be made along the way. I mean, they could have made, and it was obviously like a money making thing. We just kind of pump it out and get their couple million
Right.
and then move on. But they could have made 3 movies just off of the first book,
Right.
and then there's 3 more books that are even larger than the first one.
Right.
I mean, they could have had 10, 12 movies out of
Um,
this. It's an amazing story, but yeah, absolutely garbage adaptation, as Midget B says.
Um, yeah, the and that's another thing. Something like that. It gave me a little bit of pause because I'm not sure that they're going to pace it properly. Trying to
Hmm.
put too much into a few episodes as well, because it's supposed to be a series. And
Yeah,
and and honestly, John, if the acting is on par, they could take this 10 seasons. They could get 10 seasons out of the entire saga. Cut out some of the books, some of the stuff from the books that wasn't that isn't as relevant. I mean,
yeah.
surprisingly enough, you come away from the entire series with like 100 questions about, well, what happened to this person? What happened to that person? What happened? Because
Hmm.
there's a cast of thousands, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge cast. But they could get 10 seasons out of it easy, especially if it's Game of Thrones level writing Game of Thrones level writing for the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, basically. But um, so, in talking about this, John, this is actually this does lead into the topic that we're going to talk about tonight because I believe it was last week after the show you and I had some off
Hmm.
mic conversation, right? And we were talking about we were talking about entitlements, um, and there's a lot of entitlements out there, right? Um,
Yep.
a lot of entitlements that people don't necessarily think of as entitlements. So when you look at things like, I pulled up this fancy dancy list of things that our government considers entitlements, which they just lump under the welfare programs. But
Hmm.
basically, there are a bunch of categories. So some of these I don't even know if maybe you do or don't know about. Have you ever heard of the negative income tax?
No.
Basically, it's the earned income credit and the child tax credit. So basically,
Mm,
like if you're low income and you
gotcha.
file your taxes and you don't owe any money, you can still wind up getting money back for the earned income credit and the child
Right.
tax credit, right? So, for instance, I know someone here in the household wound up getting a large tax return because of that, right?
Right.
But then, of course, there's SNAP, the food program, housing assistance. You're familiar with HUD, right? You've
Section
heard of
8
that.
housing.
Section,
Yeah.
well, yeah, some people call Section 8 HUD,
Yeah.
however
That's
you
that's
look
how
at
I've
it.
heard it. I've never heard HUD in reference to that, but yeah,
Oh, so
I've always
SS,
heard Section 8.
gotcha. So SSI is listed in here
Hmm.
as a Social Security, of course, is SSI, the
Hmm.
Social Security income. And just real quick about HUD, like even you and I can apply for HUD depending on the income you make, and
Hmm.
still be able to afford. It doesn't have to be. When you think Section 8, like there's a little area in town. These are the Section 8 houses, right?
Right.
Kind of thing. But it actually it spreads wider to more homeowners. Like new homeowners can actually take advantage of that if they make a low enough income and still be able to get a house in somewhere outside the Section 8 neighborhood, as it were.
Hmm.
But then, of course, we have Pell Grants. You're familiar with those, right? Those are
Yeah.
government-funded college loans, educational loans. TAMF, the Temporary Assistant for Needy Families. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
So basically, say something happens, you have some major life event. Say a room in a couple of rooms in your house get burned out, and you've got to get out of the house. And say, you can apply for this emergency thing in certain situations, and they give you a little bit of cash. They give you some money,
Mm.
some groceries, some food stamps, whatever you want to call it. Make sure that you have some stuff to get you through in that short period of time till you get things straightened out. Child nutrition, which of course we're familiar with, all the child nutrition things that they have at school, where you can get on the programs and have your lunch paid for
Yeah.
if your family's low income. Head Start programs, job training programs; those are considered welfare. Um,
Hmm.
WIC,
Interesting.
which is not much different than SNAP. And then we have some child care stuff. They have money that you can get for child care. Low income home energy assistance program. Basically, you can get help on your energy bill, right, if you're low income. Then you have I love this one, the Lifeline, or in parentheses the Obama phone, provide discounted phone service, including cell, to low income individuals.
A
As
friend of
per
mine
the
had that.
FCC.
A friend of mine had that for a while. You got like 1,000 texts a month and like a couple hours of like phone. Yeah,
Talk time, right?
talk time. Yeah, and yeah, that was it. It wasn't. I think it was actually before smartphones, or like as smartphones were first coming out, but it was not a smartphone.
Right.
It was like the cheapest little rinky flip phone.
Grasshopper.
Little dinky phone is what I meant. Yeah, flip phone. Jesus.
Now, these are things that a lot of people are familiar with, and as I said, these are under the umbrella of welfare programs by the government, anti-poverty programs, as it were. So this is how our government fights poverty. By the way, this is how they do it, by just making money available through all these different scenarios. But we have other things that I consider entitlements, and a lot of people wouldn't agree with. Okay, and probably more politically minded folks, politicians, wouldn't agree with it, seeing as how these are acts, right? These are things that have been, I guess, for want of a better term, legislated, right? But the Civil Rights Act, and vis-a-vis affirmative action. Those are legislation that were put in place, act that was put in place, and as I was telling you off mic earlier, these are very specific. Like the Civil Rights Act, really what it seems to me to do more than anything is basically reinforce laws that were already in place. Right? Tell you, no, really, you have to obey these laws that are in place. You have to observe people's rights that are already in place. So they had to put the Civil Rights Act to tell people, no, seriously, you need to obey these laws. Because basically it's to enforce the constitutional right to vote, which the Constitution already covers, right? The enforcement of the protection of the right to vote, right? Even going so far as giving the right to vote to women and African Americans, right?
Yep.
Okay. To confer jurisdiction upon the district courts of the United States to provide injunctive relief against discrimination in public accommodations, to authorize the Attorney General to institute suits to protect constitutional rights in public facilities and public education, to extend the Commission on Civil Rights, to prevent discrimination in federally assisted programs, to establish a Commission on Equal Employment Opportunity, and for other purposes. Basically, this is going in place to doubly enforce everything that we just said that are already rights, constitutional rights, things that we're supposed to observe in public facilities, things we're supposed to observe in programs, things like this, right? You're not supposed to discriminate already because the Constitution tells you not to discriminate.
Well,
all men are created equal, right?
Yeah, but to be fair, though, you do have the right to association, which means the right to not associate with anyone based on anything. So if you choose not to associate with someone based on race, then you should have the right to do so.
So now, in effect, though, does that not say that the Civil Rights Act is saying that a business must do business with someone?
Yes.
And that they can't deny business just because of who they are?
Based on the protected classes, right?
Right.
But I mean, to be fair, you can just say, well, I'm not going to serve you for a different reason. But so as long as you don't say it's for that reason. And we talked about this in one of our first couple of episodes. I forget which one. It was one of the first couple. And yeah, it was something about the right to refuse service. And if you don't have that right, if you can't say like, oh, I don't want to serve black people, you can think of another reason to not serve them. So again, it really does nothing but gets votes, as Midget B is correctly pointing out in the chat. is that you can say, "Oh, look, we passed this great and noble act, and it's amazing," but ultimately, it doesn't really change much.
Right. And one of the things about the Civil Rights Act is the language is very specifically not targeting any group, right?
Hmm.
It's very blanket that you can't do these things and discriminate against anyone in these situations.
Right.
And we all, and then that extends into affirmative action, which basically said you can't give special privilege to groups, but you need to take these groups into account basically as well as everybody else. They must have an equally or better fighting chance than others for things like college and loans and things like this, right? And
Hmm.
my point to this is both of those things, if we talk about civil rights, who is the primary group that associates with civil rights? African Americans, right?
Hmm.
Because that's what, there was Martin Luther King, the movement, the Million Man March, the whole nine yards was about African American civil rights.
Hmm.
And so the Civil Rights Act was put into place. So, you know, African
And to be fair,
Americans,
though, at that time they had legitimate grievances. I
sure,
mean, absolutely,
granted,
100%. Yeah.
they felt oppressed. And
Hmm.
not that that's changed much. They still feel oppressed, even after almost 60 years of civil rights being in place.
Yeah.
There's still this
A lot of
expect.
goalpost moving
Sure,
going on. Yeah.
um, but again, this is civil rights is associated with African Americans to the extent this many years later that um, I believe that African Americans and then as we move into affirmative action, other minorities see these two things as entitlements specifically for them. Like civil rights wouldn't apply to you and I
Hmm.
in their mind. This is about making things equal for them, not for us.
Hmm.
So, but and that is why I say these have become entitlements as well. Like I see these as entitlements to certain groups of people. And what was it you said? You see anything as an entitlement as long as it puts one group above another, right?
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Because rights apply equally across the board.
Correct.
Yeah.
So then we take a look at that, and as we were talking about it last week, I had an epiphany, and I basically said to you, John, I really believe that more people in this country would fight to protect their entitlements
Hmm.
than they would to protect their rights.
Yeah. I mean, we
Because
see people trying to take down our rights all the time, trying to dismantle, certain rights that we have, and trying to establish more entitlements.
correct.
Hmm.
And so in effect, I believe that a large portion of our population has you know has made this shift in their mind that the entitlements that they have in this country are rights for them, and they've watched the sacrifice. They don't even pay attention to the sacrifice of things like your right to privacy, which we've let go, we've
Oh
given
yeah.
up, right? Without a
Hmm.
fight, without a struggle, because I'm a big proponent of taking away many of the entitlements that are in this country. And
Yeah.
I would start with the Civil Rights Act. I would start with affirmative action, only because, as you know, I believe that these foment more division than they actually correct. So, first question to you, John, is: can we take civil rights and affirmative action away in this country, or would that cause too much of an uproar? Would that cause a civil
Hmm.
outbreak?
So this is again something else that we've talked about in the first couple episodes of the podcast when we were still audio only, and so I'm actually really excited to see how far you've come, full circle even, because we've had the same argument,
Hmm?
from the other perspective. So that's really interesting to see. And what I said back then, and I'll say it again because I still think it's the case, Doing that now, taking away the Civil Rights Act and affirmative action at this time, would be a terrible idea. There would be mass violence. There would be mass riots. It's not the right time to do it if it's going to be done. So I mean, while I would like it to be, and just have like one blanket, here are your rights, and it applies to everyone equally, regardless of skin color, religion, whatever. That's oh hey Cameron. Um, it would not be a good idea to do that at this point in time.
Um, but I'm really getting to the point where I believe that these kind of things may be the only way to cure the SJW culture we have, because I really feel like a lot of that, the motion that they get, a lot of their motivation is this idea that they are entitled to so much, right? That it's this mentality that seems, that's kind of kicked off in your generation, the millennial generation, and is kind of exacerbated a little bit in Gen Z, of this instant gratification kind of thing, that we're entitled to something. They're not moving out of their houses, or staying with mom and dad because they have a right to. It's their home. That's where they live there. They're it's okay for them to do that. They're entitled to that. Mom and dad should be taking care of me till I'm ready to take care of myself. Not they should be taking care of me until I go take care of myself. They're taking care of me until I'm ready to go take care of myself.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think you're projecting a lot from your own
No.
situation over there.
No. I've read.
Like.
I mean, I've read multiple news
Yeah,
articles that talk about the age of children leaving the home is now reaching near 30.
It is.
This is unthinkable from my generation. I'm speaking from my generational standpoint. This is kind of an unthinkable thing. Yeah, I mean, I understand it happens in my home, but it's happening in homes across the country. This is not an uncommon thing anymore. Just like it's not uncommon for young people to go and get a job and be surprised 2 months in why they're not promoted into some higher position and doing, finding more success in their job. I've already been here for 2 months. Why don't I have a big raise, and why don't I have my own office? Why have I not been promoted into something?
Yeah.
Who says things like, they actually say things like Robert says? Who says that?
What he's saying, like he's agreeing with you, saying that the kids these days and shaking his fist and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's I mean it's so with this level of entitlement is it just seems that the only way to get rid of the mentality of the entitled is to remove the entitlements, right? If a kid feels like they're hot shit because they've got all these cool toys and they're constantly bragging about it and being a little ass to all their friends, take the toys away and it humbles them up, right? I don't know. So I mean, are you saying that it would be impossible? Would they actually rise up? I mean, have we gotten to that point that their entitlements are so much more important that they would rise up over that versus rising up over anything, one of your rights being taken away?
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing that, right? We're seeing people trying to get rid of, free speech, the Second Amendment. Obviously, privacy is already out the window.
Well, to be fair, they're trying to get rid of other people's free speech, not their own.
Right. Well, yeah, because they say the correct things, so it's fine.
Correct.
They don't have a problem, right? But yeah. So I mean, we already see that, and we see people fighting for more entitlements and obviously keeping the ones that they already have, and then fighting for more of them instead of trying to fight to get our rights back, which we've lost. I mean,
so with this level of entitlement in this country, are we on a path to pure socialism?
I think that's the plan, at least. I mean,
now you say that's the plan. The plan by like the extreme left, or are you talking in Washington, like the left in Washington is trying to make this plan?
Talking about like the left in Washington and certain like activist groups, things like that. Those are the ones who are planning on trying to get to pure socialism. or I mean, maybe not even pure socialism, but like just moving more towards that. If fighting is only going to escalate, yeah, no, I mean, I agree. That's what it seems like is going to happen.
All right, so if we started small, like, okay, well, we can't, to be honest with you, Social Security can't be the first thing that we get rid of. I'm sorry, it just can't, because we've created a system where there are people right now that depend on that. I mean,
Yeah.
we could do a cutoff of Social Security in X number of years, like say 5, 10 years from now, and people that reach that point, if they've reached the retirement age, they get what they paid in. Everybody else, well, we're all going to get screwed, because the money that we would have gotten back that we paid in all our lives, they'll be busy paying to reparations.
Well, no, Congress also constantly steals from it as well.
Well, they borrow against it. It's
Yeah,
called borrowing, John. They intend to pay
yeah.
it back one
Oh,
day.
I'm sure.
They do.
I'm
They intend to
sure.
pay it back. And they continue to send the Social Security checks out, John. I mean, they
They
do.
do.
I mean, it
Well,
doesn't.
yeah, it's just like
We
real
don't.
life. You keep
Right.
writing bad checks over and
Right.
over again,
That's
hoping none of
floating.
them
They're
get
not writing
cashed.
bad checks, John. They're just floating them.
Right. Post dating, dating, yeah,
Yeah,
to a
post
certain
dating
day
them until
later.
we get our money back from China that
Right.
we're owed, and we get our money back from
Right.
Russia and Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia and England. Right.
Just
Just
don't cash this in until Thursday because I gotta move some.
right. Right. Wouldn't that be some shit? Send out a memo
Yeah.
with a check. Just please don't cash this till Thursday,
Yeah, I
Friday,
gotta
maybe.
move some money around. I gotta
Friday
borrow
if
some
you
more money.
can, right?
Yeah.
We're waiting on China to sell us some money right now.
Yeah, exactly.
We just sold some weapons to Saudi Arabia. I swear to God, the money's on the way. It's $100 billion. I'm telling you, it's
Right.
coming, right? All right, so so to do this, then we'd have to start eating away at the smaller programs, right? We'd have to attack the smaller welfare programs, which is going to a certain extent, disenfranchise the impoverished. But if we were to listen to Ben Shapiro, because you've heard about what he said about people that are having to work 2 or 3 jobs to get by.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
he's like, that's your own fault. Just go get one job that's better than the other 3, because everybody's got that option. Everybody's got that level of education. Everybody's just got the chutzpah to just drop 3 jobs and go get one that pays as well as the 3 do. I don't know that it's that easy. It's a little bit of an elitist approach. But anyway.
Well, so I mean, it's also not, it's very insensitive and very like crass, I guess, or
Mhm.
yeah. And but I mean, it's not wrong at the root of it.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
He's
come on.
not incorrect. He's just not very,
Well, I'm a proponent of trade schools, right? And there was a reason for trade schools. Some folks just aren't smart enough to get through school, or don't have the right mental pathways to get through school. They're smarter in other ways, but some people aren't that smart in this way or that way. I mean, some people are just, at best, they're going to be able to handle the blue collar environment, such as retail, fast food, restaurants, things like this. But historically, those jobs don't pay a lot of money, so you wind up getting a second job, and sometimes a third job. I mean, if you're Jamaican, 4. I'm sorry,
wow.
it was an old joke from back in the 80s that people used to make
Yeah,
about
I
Jamaicans.
totally didn't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally did not get it.
Because Jamaicans used, like, you would see, if you ever met a Jamaican back in the 80s, they always had like 2, 3, 4 jobs that they worked. And they work like 10, 15 hours at each one, or sometimes they'd work 20 hours here and there, but they put in like 60 hours a week working at like 4 different jobs. I did know one guy that actually held down 6 jobs. He
That's
worked at 6
ridiculous.
different places, like a little bit here and there each day. But it's crass. It's a foolish idea to think that it's just that easy, because jobs that pay you the kind of money that would replace 3 jobs, well, I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean,
we're starting to branch into
like,
skilled labor.
It's not easy, but it is doable.
Sure,
for
sure, but it
and
does.
most people can do it.
Sure, but it does start to branch into skilled labor. You start looking at skilled labor jobs, and a lot of people don't have the skills. I
Yeah,
don't.
Cameron is not a fan of Ben
It's okay,
Shapiro
Cameron.
whatsoever.
I didn't say I was listening to it. I'm just saying, I mean, I keep up with things. You got to keep up with things. If
Yeah,
idiocy is out there, one must partake of it to understand. Um, but anyway, it's when you start when you start looking at skilled labor. Well, that's not really necessarily an option for everybody. Hell, other impediments stand in your way. Like, I'm 50 years old. Did you know
hmm
that it's harder to get a job at 50 than when you're at 20?
yeah, of course, absolutely.
Even in jobs that don't pay a lot of money. At
hmm
50 years old, it's harder to get a job. Um,
Yeah,
oh, but I'm protected. I got my
yeah,
civil rights. You gotta,
right.
you
Well,
gotta,
they
you gotta look at
exactly.
me.
Well,
Look at
that's
me.
the point, right? Is that they didn't discriminate against you based on your age. It was some other factor that they can point
Sure,
to and be like, okay, that's
sure.
the one thing. That's
Yeah,
the reason.
they did not hire me because I was old. They hired somebody else because they were younger.
Right.
You're right. There's a difference,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. That's. I mean, yeah. That's why that stuff's useless, right?
So again, where do we start to dismantle this entitlement before we have a situation where we lead to socialism, John? How do you start to dismantle the entitlement system that's been built so these people do realize that there's more at stake than just your free shit?
Yeah. It has to start at the cultural level. I mean, it has to start with like what you and I are doing, what our Freedom Scoop guys do, what the much larger platforms do, which is just trying to tell people how to actually make a living, how to actually or like what I guess to kind of influence the culture
Well,
to change so that you're not so that you don't think, oh well, I've owed all this stuff, so it doesn't matter what kind of job I have, I should be able to make as much money as I want, or
is
whatever.
but is
But
that it?
that's no, that's not the only thing. I'm saying
Well,
that's the first
well, I
step.
was just going to ask you, does that not seem like, I mean, with the younger generations, one of the things that I think is very difficult is telling, they're conflating something like that with telling them what to do, right? No, telling me to do that means I don't just get my entitlements and I don't get my advantages. Telling me to do that makes me go be a normie and I have to work for a living, and you're telling them what to do. You're controlling them. You're the man, right? Tell them they got to go get a job and how to, pull
Yeah.
themselves up by their bootstraps. Just saying.
Well, some people need that kick in the ass, especially people who grew up without fathers, especially if they didn't grow up with a father in the household. They need that kick in the ass from someone. You know, and if it can be the people that they watch on YouTube, then so be it.
All right, so
You know.
we've got to attack the cultural level of it. What else do we do?
hmm
I mean, where do we go from there? I mean, how do we? Because will that is that enough to impact policy?
Not immediately, but yeah. I mean, politics is downriver of culture. So as long as we start changing the culture, then the politics will start changing as well. That's why we've seen a lot of people in Washington, especially Democrats, have gone way far left. That's where the culture has been going.
Okay, see, I have to disagree with you on this for one simple reason.
hmm
This is a situation where the impetus to strike now, the impetus to fix this we're on the precipice of do or die. Either you get it changed now, or there's going to be enough of an influx of this entitled mindset moving into Washington that when it does begin to affect policy, it's not going to affect it in the right way. It's these SJWs that are going to be coming into politics already. Right, we've got
hmm
AOC in there. We've got others that are minded like her. More are coming in.
And
You're
it's
not
actually
going.
really good for changing the culture.
It
I think that
is,
having her in is really good for changing the culture because she's in the spotlight, which is constantly in the spotlight.
but the SJWs out there, the snowflakes out there, are going to support her no matter how outlandish her
Yeah,
stupidity gets.
100%. Yes,
And I,
but but that's the thing is there's people who are on the fence, people who would vote Democrat just because like they're Democrats, right? But then seeing that, I mean, there was a whole hashtag about walk away, right? Walking away from the left, saying like, oh, I was the leftist my whole life, and then X event, Y event, Z event, led me, to decide that I can't be a part of this anymore. That's happened a ton of times. That happened to me. I mean, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter back in 2016, and now I
Right.
could never support him now. So I mean, and that's not even almost a unique story. That's happening more and more and more now.
Right. Well, I don't know. I keep worrying that more like AOC are going to get into Washington before we can address this issue, because I know, I know more or less where your mindset's going to come from, and of course, your thought is we've got to change the culture in this country to, because you see that as more impactful on changing the policy, as you said,
Hmm.
downstream. Um, I don't know,
I
John.
also think it's the hardest thing to change, especially by not using force. Changing the culture is very difficult, very slow process, but it's well worth the
Well,
fight, I
yeah,
guess.
but if the culture outpaces you and gets into a position of policy making,
Hmm.
I don't think you can change the cultural mindset as fast as they're going to be moving their agenda. I mean, this cultural
Uh,
mindset is about to sweep through Washington in the next 10 years,
yeah.
15 at most, and
So
it's
the
going to
thing
be
is, though,
madness.
comes back from the you know uh, sunshine being the best disinfectant, sunlight being the best disinfectant, right? The more of this you can see, uh, the more this like the average person can see, the more they're going to reject it because they can see how bad it actually is. Especially if it's not just theory and it's in practice. They're able to see why these things are so bad and why they don't work, and then move away from it and vote against it next chance they get.
It just seems like a hard row to hoe to try and
Yeah,
wake up
100%.
a woke culture. You know what
Right.
I mean?
But we're not
It's
going to do it because it's easy. We're going to do it because it's hard.
Yeah, but we need to do it fucking quick, John. Cameron points out, he says, excuse me, Seawall. He says, have a surrender of rights to be on welfare, like choice of where you live or shop. And then he continued to say, bring back being shamed while being on welfare, cap welfare, pay out to get you to the poverty line only. Now, the
Hmm.
only issue I have there, Seawall, is if you're going to say, if you put it at that level, you might as well institute a UBI. Uh, because reaching the poverty line now, that number has creeped up much much higher than folks might realize. I want to say it's somewhere around over
It's like
25.
12,000.
Is it
No, poverty line is
12,000
like
is the poverty,
12,000.
but low income
Yeah.
is like 25 $30,000 is low income,
I think
right?
it's
That's
like 12,500 or something like that
okay.
is the poverty line.
So that's basically Andrew
Or
Yang's
14
UBI.
or something. Yeah.
That's basically Andrew Yang's UBI, which if you say, if you look at it that way, that's a good argument for the UBI that he proposes, because that gets everybody to the poverty line.
Right, but that also gives people on the poverty line who don't necessarily need it, thereby being more of a drain than the welfare system would be. Now, I understand he's got ways that he says he's going to, pay for it and all that, which is, there's a totally different discussion we can have at some point.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I mean, it would give everyone that instead of just the people who need it.
Well, I I can agree with where Seawall's coming from to a certain extent. I think it goes along with something you said about, was it you or that said something about make the presidency unappealing?
That's more of a Tenchi line,
That
but
was
I
Tinchy,
mean,
wasn't it?
I
Yeah.
totally agree with it. And it's supposed to be. That is the original idea, is to make it undesirable.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that, if we started doing that with welfare, I think it would be, institute drug checks for welfare recipients. Put a cap on it. No more kids. You don't get extra money for more kids. Things like this, right? Start
Mhm.
making it non-beneficial to them to manipulate the system, and then maybe they'll start to work their way off of
The
it.
the only
But
thing I don't agree
so
with is the
long,
drug testing one. And we was again another thing that we talked about few first few episodes of the show. Is in that drug tests are unreliable. They're very easy to beat, and they have a high cost, especially if you have a large volume of people. Now you can say, "Oh, it
um,
would make them pay for their own test," but then what's the point of having welfare, right? If you don't have the money How
Right.
can you pay for the test? If you can't pay for the test, you can't get the money. It's this kind of vicious circle.
Well, I will say this: you can buy a drug test for $1 at the dollar store.
Yeah,
Just saying.
I thought they were
But
gonna accept
no, no,
that.
no, 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 no.
But I'm
But when
saying,
I
yeah, you have to go to a
but
lab
when
and everything.
once upon a time, you actually had to go check in. You actually had to do things besides just sit down online and throw a few lies into the system and keep
Hmm.
getting your checks. Right? It's there used to be, and so maybe that's something that they should institute as well. You can no longer do this online. You got to go down to your welfare office. You got to meet with somebody. You got to do this. Yes, I understand there's costs involved, but you know getting people off welfare will start to put more money in the pool to manage welfare.
Hmm.
Um, Cameron says the working class is going to spend a far higher percentage of their income on consumer goods. Consumerism drives the economy. Our economy is only as strong as the bottom 90% spending.
See, there's a couple of misconceptions in there, a couple of misdirections, I should say. And I hope you're still listening. Um, yeah, when he says working class is going to spend a far higher percentage of their income on consumer goods, that's true. That is 100% true. However, what he's trying to, uh, or I guess what's being the misdirection there, is that the rich are going to pay a lot more. So less of their percentage of income, but they're paying more overall. So his second statement down there, consumerism drives the economy, which that part is true. Our economy is only as strong as the bottom 90% spending. Well, that's not true though, right? Because yes, they spend more of their percentage of their income, but they spend less overall.
Right. Because whereas they spend, you know, they may spend $1,000 a month on bills and shit. The wealthy spend $1,000 on lunch.
Yeah,
Right.
potentially,
Right.
potentially, yeah,
Potentially. Right. They invite a few
yeah, yeah,
friends and spend $1,000 on lunch at the golf club. So
right.
yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying there. I understand that consumerism drives the economy. I get that, but this is he was kind of talking. That was kind of leaning towards this whole thing with Ben Shapiro. But
Hmm.
the money you spend has got it's about how you get that money, and you can't just fucking up and go get a really good paying job. It's not
No,
that easy.
no, you can't.
But with these entitlements, we've got. I think somehow, John, we've got to start breaking them down, and I think it's got to start happening at the Washington level. Only from the standpoint that the slow grind of trying to change the culture, um, it's. I don't know that the timing would be good, like possible before they beat us out. You've got the colleges at work building our new crop of politicians for
Hmm.
the coming century. These are some crazy motherfuckers coming. I'm just saying. You know, they you know they don't care about your freedom of speech, but don't take away affirmative action. Don't take away civil rights, which is just a redundancy to the Constitution. They don't care about their freedom of privacy,
Hmm.
their right to privacy. They don't care about that because they've sacrificed it just as well as the rest of us, and
Well,
they
they've never
overlook
grown
it.
up with privacy. That's the
Right?
thing.
They don't
Yeah.
understand how important that is. Yet they cry and kvetch if their identity gets stolen. Watch, they will. Um, but
I
at
mean, I
this
would too, to be fair.
But at the
So,
same time, yes, like you said, they advocate for controlling speech of others, and
hmm.
So you know, would you agree that they would literally rather give up those rights than they would their entitlements?
Oh yeah,
Um,
100%.
um,
Yeah.
so does it does that mean we need? Do we need to address the Constitution? Do we need to?
No, we need
Would
to
that?
enforce it.
Well, that's what we do. We even go so far as
No,
to doubly
we
enforce
don't.
it with the Civil Rights Act.
But no, we that was the last time we did. I
Right.
mean, we stopped enforcing it with the Freedom no,
The
Patriot
Patriot
Act.
Act.
Patriot Act.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
we need
all that
to
really
get
did
rid of
was
that to enforce
all
the
we did.
Constitution.
All we did was step on. Uh, Seawall says he's got a solution for this problem.
Oh, is it a final solution, T-Wall? I wonder.
Who knows?
We'll
Only the seawall knows.
know shortly.
Eh, rope
Rope
is
is
quite
quite
cheap these
cheap.
days. Jesus Christ.
Sounds pretty final to me.
What is that word I'm looking for? Disavow. Disavow.
And as we know, the fuel will pay for itself after a while. So I
Right.
mean, that's a good thing.
You guys. You kids and your libertarianism.
And your helicopters, yeah.
Okay, so now there's a you know there's a question for you, John, from a libertarian mindset. Um, is this snowflake culture, our SJWs, are they the kind of thing that can ultimately kill the Libertarian Party once and for all?
I mean, only if they were actually to get to where to the point where they can get rid of free speech, in which case they can control all speech, and then yeah, the Libertarian Party would be gone. Libertarians would have to go into hiding, but there would definitely be a rising up, so to say, before that happened. And Midget B has a question in the chat. Do we want to answer it?
Did
Do we
you
want to
read
tell
it?
him? No.
Well, here's the question, John, for you to
All right.
answer. For you to answer.
For me
Why
to
would
answer.
anyone want to replace conservative, vigilant, educated voters with stable families and low reliance on government with low inhibition, extravagant, Gibbs-fed consumers?
Yeah. No, I mean, why would? Yeah, why would you?
The SJWs are the tools of the folks that might wish to do that.
Yeah, no,
Um,
100%. Because I mean, yeah, as soon as you have everyone reliant on the state, this is the point of socialism: is to have everyone on the, relying on the state to take care of them, which then, of course, grants them more control over the individual.
So in this week, we talked about having this show last week, and so I've been thinking about it. It's just kind of running around in the back of my head, and I came to a conclusion. And this, based on what you just said, it makes me glum and sad. Um, I kind of came around to the thought that I believe libertarians are the only ones that could actually fix the entitled society.
Yeah, I
Right?
agree.
I
I'm glad
mean,
you finally came around.
but hold on though. I mean, you're an endangered species,
yeah.
grasping at strands to try and stay above water and hold some relevancy.
Yeah.
And your libertarianism screams in the face of social justice.
Oh, 100%, yeah. Because it actually makes people equal, like equal opportunity, as opposed to, everyone just has the same stuff.
So, if it's going to take libertarianism, because I really think it is, because if we look at the left and we look at the right in Washington, both sides have their own agendas as far as these entitlements are concerned, right? Um, one side, the further you go to the left, the more socialist it becomes, this idea that the government should just take care of everything. And not necessarily just in Washington, but in the cultural mindset as well, right? Mom and daddy government should take care of everything. But then as you move farther to the right, then you have to worry that, okay, sure, they might get rid of entitlements, but at the cost of authoritarianism, right?
Hmm.
Begin to lock us down because, I firmly believe that the right wants more control over our constitutional rights versus governing than the left does. But that's just
Yeah.
me. Certain ones, actually. I mean, it's a catch-22. The right, plenty of guns for everybody, but we need fair play in social media. I see those two things, and I'm like, what are you doing to our?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a couple of camps, when it comes to that. Even just among, like, just on the right, there's several different camps when it comes to, Internet Bill of Rights, or, just, uh, having to treat people equally, and, not being allowed to have bias. There's tons of different camps. So I wouldn't even say that they're united on that.
So the government stepping in and starting to take entitlements away creates a civil war, a cultural civil war, right? Boom. This
Hmm.
is going to blow up in our faces. If we try and let culture do it, culture is going to take. I would say you couldn't fix this within the next 20 to 25 years.
Maybe not, but you can definitely get it on the way
And
to
that's
being
with the
fixed.
current two-party system. That's with Democrats and
Yeah.
Republicans in the system realizing that maybe we need to shut these folks up. But it would take a long
Hmm.
time. And you would still have to get rid of the entitlements. You just have to do it over a slower period of time and slowly cut them out to, kind of like the Patriot Act removed privacy, and kids are growing up without any, so they don't realize it. Well, that's what you would be looking for is, to get to your first generation that grows up without some of or most of these entitlements, right? So they don't know what they're missing. That's what it's got to roll into, a long time frame. So that leaves libertarians. that leaves a failing ideology, which shouldn't be. I'll give you credit. There are certain the core of
I
libertarianism
don't think
shouldn't
it's,
die.
and it's not the end. It's not the ideology that's failing. It's just that it's not popular anymore because it's
Okay,
not.
the ideologists are failing the ideology.
Um, I think that especially socialism, is just much more appealing, especially if you don't actually learn about socialism and you just kind of learn, oh,
Well,
you get a whole
sure.
bunch of free shit.
Well, that's
That's way more appealing. You can sit on your ass and do whatever you want. That's much more appealing than having to
sh-
work hard and, earn
sure.
the things that you have. It's a lot easier that way.
But doesn't that kind of tie into this, this extremely present day broad based mentality about libertarianism, where you have some that believe in a little bit of socialism makes libertarianism just right, and others who believe that
Yeah,
a little bit
absolutely.
of authoritarianism makes libertarianism just right.
Yeah.
You talk about, you have this idea of so little government, but we need government to do these specific things. Well, no, these
Right.
specific things. So it's very broad based. You guys have got such a broad mind on this and such diverse
Yeah.
spectrums, that
Well,
that
Midget B actually made a good point about it. Imagine trying to unite a bunch of free speech individualists behind any one thing, and that is a big. It's a double edged sword in that way. In one way, it's the most freedom possible, and the other way, it's hard to organize people behind a cause because there's plenty of people who say, oh, and I'm one of these people who say I would never vote for the Libertarian Party or I'd never join the Libertarian Party because I disagree with X, Y, and Z, even though I agree with most of it. So
right,
I wouldn't join the National Party. I voted Gary Johnson in the 2016 election, but that was just because I didn't want to vote for Hillary or Trump. But I didn't. Again, I disagreed with a lot of what Gary Johnson had to say,
right.
but I also agree with the core of what he was saying.
Would you agree with me that um, most libertarians need to shut the fuck up, stick to the core ideals, and get somebody in play?
um, Not the shut the fuck up part,
Well,
but
shut the fuck up on
certainly
your own rhetoric and stick to the
certainly
core ideals.
compromising. No, no, no. I think the rhetoric needs to be there.
No, because it becomes
But
confusing, John.
it becomes confusing to
You
people who
get a,
don't
you get
know
a,
better,
you.
and that's
Could you
that's their
imagine a
problem.
stage full of libertarian candidates like we've seen with the Democrats? Much like Midget B said, imagine trying to unite a bunch of free speech individualists behind any one thing.
Hmm.
I mean, you get a bunch of libertarians on the stage all talking, man. I would, I'd walk away from that no, it's not knowing what I had the right to do, or who should give me my rights, or who should adjudicate my rights, or who should do what with my rights. I mean,
Hmm.
it's true. I mean, there's just such a
Yeah,
diversity.
no, I mean it
I
would.
mean,
Yeah,
any candidates that are coming out from the Libertarian Party need to hug as close to the core of the ideology as possible
but the thing is,
for that
though,
mindset to set in with voters that are typically right or left.
on the stage, though, like that you just described with the 20 libertarians, whatever. I mean, the best ideas would win out, like within the party, obviously. You know what I mean? So whoever resonates most with the crowd or with the people watching in general will be the one who goes up ahead. And that's what the whole point of like polling and stuff like that is. And the polling needs to be kind of reworked for sure. But yeah, I mean, you would have different ideas instead of like we have with the Democrats, where it's just one idea told 10 different ways, and then next night you get to hear the second idea told the same way with just slight variants. I mean, it's all the same shit that they're talking about.
I could kind of see that, maybe. Seawall pointed something out. And I have to comment on this because I don't necessarily agree. He says the millennials will be a second lost
Oh,
generation,
for sure they are.
which I can agree with that. But he says Gen Z is our best chance at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's
Now,
true. That is true.
let me tell you why I disagree with that.
Okay.
You know, as generations come about. So, for instance, you're a millennial, right? You are born at a certain point in that generation, either the front end, mid, or back end of that generation. So generations tend to bleed together, right? So, you know, millennials, in effect, I think, as we go through the generation, the younger millennials swing further to that left mindset, right? We're getting further and further left entitled mindset. And when you say Gen Z is the best bet at the moment, well, they're our best bet if we can get them past these things that they're adopting from the generation before them, from the millennials, because they seem to be taking a strong hold on the entitlement aspect. They seem to be taking a strong hold on the PC culture. This idea of social justice, I think, is going to be much more exaggerated as we see more Gen Z come of age, because these things grow. Look at what baby boomers did to my generation, and look at what we did to your generation. Right, these mindsets of removing corporal punishment in the house, things like the books and the TVs and everything. Just the whole mindset behind bulldozer parents versus helicopter parents. These kind of things, it transitions into the next generation, and so we have to hope that they. Especially when you're talking about a generation, as we pointed out, that is growing up not realizing that their Fourth Amendment rights are gone. They're growing up without one of their rights in place, and it's as if they don't even realize it. Like, it's so how will they be our best bet if they're willing to sacrifice, or not even see what they're sacrificing, I guess is the best way to say it. How do you read the Constitution and get to the Fourth Amendment and go, wait a minute, I don't have this, right?
Yeah, well, to them, the Fourth Amendment means your parents are going to knock on the door before they come in your room. That's which is not something I had. My parents would be like, I always pictured them on the other side of the door with the hand on the knob and just and then jump in, trying to catch me doing something. But no, I mean, what Seawall was saying there is they're rebelling against the SJWs. You're only seeing the signal boosted Zoomers, which is of course boomers who are Gen Z. So we are seeing that they are more conservative at the very least, or at least not as left leaning as they used to be, as millennials were when we were growing up. They're kind of because they're growing up in the middle of this culture war, and they can see the damage that's already been done, and they're more active on places like YouTube and Twitch and these other places, Twitter especially, and they're seeing the fire around them, and they have almost like a not an obligation, I guess, or a responsibility, which I guess they do have a responsibility to, but they seem to have a desire to put that fire out. And I think that's what they're going to at least be trying to do. I don't know if it's going to get done in their generation, but they're certainly trying to. And I mean, trying to name a few prominent left-wing Gen Zs. I mean, David Hogg is the first one that comes to mind, and I mean, yeah, I think he's lost a lot of his so what I'm looking for, like a lot of his momentum to kind of bring about the change that he's trying to bring about. They don't really bring him up as much. He's not really, even after shootings, he's not really that prominent anymore.
Okay.
So I mean, I think he's already burned out.
So I could see what you're saying from a cultural standpoint, John.
Mm-hmm.
But what about from what we're talking about here tonight from an entitlement versus rights standpoint? What's more important to Gen Z? The
Well,
entitlements,
so
because they like to play the victim, you know. I mean, they've
some of
got
them
some of
do,
that mentality, right?
sure.
I mean,
But now it's victim from the other side, right? It's victim from the right, and that's where we get our right wing snowflakes. You know,
right.
we talked about that previously. Um, so what was I saying? Conservative, right wing snowflakes. Yeah, so they're kind of engaging in the same fight from the other direction, kind of fighting fire with fire. Which there is some use for that, in that it shows the idiocy of using that as whether or not you deserve entitlements, to kind of designate what rights are and these kind of things. It shows the lunacy of that kind of mentality to the people on the left, because they don't see it when it's their people doing it. They see it when it's the other side, and they can say the same sentence but switching out the words to the other side. And you'll see they'll be like, oh, right wing snowflakes, and you think you're being oppressed, you think you're being attacked, and it's like, okay, that's exactly what we've said to you. Like, can we kind of get past that and actually discuss things instead of trying to decide who's more oppressed? So it's good in that way, but I don't think it's good overall. I think it needs to kind of die out, the victim mentality.
Well, one thing, when we talk about SJWs, and of course, right now I'll refer to SJWs on the left because
Hmm.
where any social justice warrior bullshit stems from, is from the left, and as you said,
Yeah.
we're starting to see it creep out on the right in its in its own way. Um, how, is that you talk about the Gen Zs calling out against, the biggest thing about the social justice warriors is they're a minority, but they're a vocal minority, right? They've got this loud voice, and it was kind of like Seawall was saying, you're only seeing the signal boosted Zoomers,
Hmm.
yeah. The vocal minority is just that. We have a very vocal minority in that way, and it's affecting things. Well, you know, how do we stop that from being Gen Z too? I mean, if I'm really only seeing signal boosted Gen Zers, well, then does that not mean that they're just taking up the same torch as the vocal minority, just with some tweaks? Maybe they're not going to be as social justicey, but they'll still feel entitled and still have a victim mentality where they blame older generations for all their economic woes, for where the economy is now, like every generation before them can do. I mean, I saw, I've seen posts on different things, these memes where it's like, thanks boomers for the shitty economy and this, that, and the other.
Hmm.
And it's like,
Hmm.
you know what? Find me a generation that hasn't grown up into a shitty economy, right? Everybody faces this. It's the nature of an economy. It goes up and down, right? Um,
Hmm.
but I mean,
Yeah.
they've got a vocal minority there as well.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, a large amount of them are finding, especially people like us on YouTube, people obviously much more high profile than us, but they're finding, I guess, role models and things like that, especially people who will encourage them to work hard, encourage these values in them that their parents wouldn't do it, or their single mom wouldn't do. So I think that that's really the best way to fix it. And again, I don't think you can do it in one generation, but I think that's where we're headed, and I do think that it looks like we'll make it eventually, especially if times start getting really bad. Like Seawell put in the old adage: "Strong men bring good times breed weak men bring bad times bring strong men."
Um, you know,
So it's just this vicious cycle that goes around and around, and it's coming around to weak men bringing bad times at the moment.
Right. And one thing, Seawall, I'm going to point something out to you, Seawall. Say Gen Z are still teenagers. You expect teenagers to be active in the political process. Well, I have two answers for that.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Yes, I do expect teenagers to be involved in the political process because they need to be learning about it in fucking school. And they need to be learning about what their responsibilities as a citizen and a voter in this country are while they're in school. But bear in mind, Gen Z began in approximately the mid to late 90s. 1995 to 1997 is kind of some of the numbers you see for Gen Z. So that means you're talking about kids that are actively in college or out of school and are in positions to start taking positions to make policy decisions. I mean, you can start getting involved at lower level government at an early age, right? So, no, I'm not just talking about teenagers right now. I'm talking about, even the cutoff for Gen Z is around 2015. So Gen Z is already out there, right? And they're starting to come into adulthood. They're starting to be able to have an impact. So it's, some of them are young, but that's the key. I mean, we've got to make sure that we are destroying the SJW cultural mindset in these young Gen Zers and not just hope that they're going to get re-woke on their own.
No, not at all. And that's what we talked about a few minutes ago, and we talked about this before as well. How the left, especially the far left SJWs, will tear themselves apart from the inside as well. I mean, they do it constantly. They're a cancer unto themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we see, yes, these people do get positions of power in certain industries, and then they just get destroyed. We just recently had that case. Remember, we talked about Carlos Maza
Mm-hmm.
from Vox. He was, went after Steven Crowder and got his channel completely demonetized. He was whining on Twitter forever. He just got fired from Vox. This is what happens constantly. We're gonna see it. It's just we have to go through the bad times at the moment until we can start making more strong men.
So then it goes back to my question. If we're looking at Gen Z as some hope, right? What are they willing to sacrifice? Again, they don't have a right. They don't have an existing right to privacy, not to the extent of what it once was before the Patriot Act. They've grown up in this environment without it. They don't, you wouldn't expect them to recognize it as a right because they know, most of their life is online, and they don't expect anything. If they're dumb enough, they might think that things that they put out on the internet are dead and gone, once it's out there. No, it stays there. So what else are they willing to sacrifice? You have the generation before them full of SJWs who are saying, hey, let's govern free speech, right?
Yeah.
What is free? I'm curious to find out. Maybe we need to get a good Gen Z person on here and really find out what exactly it means, what freedom of speech means to them. How much of the SJW culture and mindset is imprinting on Gen Z, their older brothers, sisters, some are parents, that they're imprinting this PC mindset on them in the home, this most formative point in their life. How much of that do you think is going to stick, John? Can they shake off enough of that PC culture to where we don't sit around having these arguments about equality for the next 50 years?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's already happening.
Do you?
Like
Do you think it's happening enough?
Yeah.
But what about their rights? Are they not willing to sacrifice?
How do you define enough?
Well, that's what I said. If you have to sacrifice any rights, I think that's more than enough. The moment you have to sacrifice rights, you've had enough.
Sure. I mean, to be fair, Gen Z hasn't really sacrificed any rights because they didn't have the Fourth Amendment, when they were growing up.
So they've been denied a right. Isn't that
oh yeah.
So, I mean, what is that?
But it's hard to miss something if you haven't had it before. So what we need to do, obviously, is encourage them to fight for the existing rights that we still have. And Sewell is going on about how they're not going to listen to people. If we try to push them in one way or another, they're going to snap. and that they need to come to us. Well, I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do, right? That's exactly. It's not about going out and actively trying to, sit down with the kid and talk to him about something, but just expressing the ideas. And if they come across it, there's a potential they could be swayed by it. Um, and obviously, and I think that they would be, most of them would be, just because they're better ideas than, some oppressive system of, oppressed hierarchies.
Right. Well, Sewell, he does make you go. He's like, these kids have had SJW shit forced down their throats
Mhm.
by guys my age. In a sense, yeah. I mean, my
Yeah.
generation we were very big on, self help and self reliance, and get your mental health from a book and don't whoop your children. Right? There was a lot of that mindset because we didn't want to grow up and be like our parents. That's
Yeah.
what the mindset amongst my generation. Don't get me wrong, I'm not of that mindset. I'm just saying that's where a lot of my generation was, and we were getting fed a lot of that shit from our parents too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get that. They've had it shoved, but they've also had it shoved down their throat by SJWs as well, right? So
Yeah.
there's some of that mentality is going to stick. I mean, like anything, anybody will take a bunch of shit that's thrown at them, whether they like it or not, and if there are specific parts of it that they kind of can agree with or aren't so bad, they'll adopt little bits and pieces of it, right?
Hmm.
Um, so how much will the millennial generation imprint on Gen Z as we move forward? As we talk about the ones that are young right now. There's still a lot of impressionable kids in Gen Z that are going to be
Hmm.
impacted by something, and it's going to be millennials,
Yeah.
and then vis-a-vis past them Gen X.
And we've seen that with people on the right as well. As time has gone on, they've kind of gone more and more towards the center. Um, you'll be hard pressed to find like a Republican who's against gay marriage at this point. At which that used to be a big, controversy. Same thing with marijuana legalization. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who says that it shouldn't be. Not saying you can't. I mean, we can name names who would be against it, but when you talk about like the average voter, they don't care.
Right.
They don't care about it anymore. And that's why we're starting to see legalization of it. And that was a big, leftist talking point as well, which it was also a libertarian talking point, but no one listens to libertarians, so
Right.
no one knew.
Right. Well, and see, well, to address what you're saying, yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying about this idea of forcing it,
Hmm.
and I guess to qualify it, it's it's not about forcing it so much as a necessity in my mind, because I'm looking at a future in which more than just your right to privacy is going away. I mean, we are on the verge of watching free speech be regulated for good or bad. And just so you'll know, both good and bad wind up being bad. We've got our Second Amendment that has been under more pressure in the last decade than I've ever seen it in my life. I would almost say the last 5 years, more so than I've ever seen it in my life, where people are having major knee-jerk reactions. And this is going as far down as the state level. States having knee-jerk reactions, which is where you want your gun legislation happening, not at a federal level, right? You want
Hmm.
states handling it, but we're having knee-jerk reactions on state levels that are pissing voters off, pissing people off, right? Um, you know,
Yeah.
and that's just out of the first four amendments, one is gone, and two are on the verge of who knows what happening.
Well, I don't think the first one's gone. First Amendment's not gone,
I didn't
but
say no. I said the fourth one's gone.
fourth.
The
Okay, yeah,
fourth is
I
gone.
misheard.
The first and second are on the verge. More so
Gotcha.
the first than the second, in my opinion, because the Supreme Court has been doing good so far with upholding constitutional rights in different cases across, throughout the last few years. But freedom of speech, man, this is the biggest one for
Hmm.
me. I do not want
Yeah.
to live in a society where I'm told what I can and cannot say. Allow me
Yeah.
to allow me to have the moral compass to make the right decisions about what to say.
Yeah.
But you're about
What's funny is Sewell brought up the amendment that I always bring up. the Third Amendment, which is, of course, you don't have to quarter soldiers during peacetime. But don't worry, Seawall. That one will be gone once we reach the socialist utopia and we can no longer afford our military bases. They'll just have to live with the populace instead. And I mean, that's a good idea anyway, because then you cut down on sedition, treason, blasphemy, things like that. So they can just how convenient would it be to just arrest the person you're living with? Because they're you don't have to like have a warrant or anything. You can just kind of walk into their bedroom and be like, all right, let's go. I heard you say Empress AOC was not as good as everyone says she is. So time for you to go to the gulags.
But it's this is what leads me to believe that the younger generations in this country see their entitlements as more important than their rights. I mean,
Yeah.
on both sides you have people wanting speech controlled. On both sides you have people wanting guns controlled in some way or another, or not controlled, legislated in some way or another. Open legislation is legislation. I don't give a fuck how you look at it. It's just an open door.
Mm-hmm.
But don't step on my entitlements. Don't step on the things that I feel like I deserve. These are things that I should have. My government makes them available, so I should have them. Like,
Right.
if I can't,
It's
if
a
I
human
lose my
right. It's a human right. Yeah.
right,
It's a human right.
right, it's a human right. It's
A human right.
right.
Oh my god.
You know, it's I had a when I talk about affirmative action, I have an anecdote about this. I had a good friend that I
Mm-hmm.
talked to. I think I've told you the story, John, off mic.
Yeah.
He was an African American. We were having a discussion about affirmative action, and he was agreeing with me. He's like, "Yeah, affirmative action should go away. I mean, it does tend to create more division than it solves." He was on board with me. He wasn't a dumb guy. But then I said, "Okay, here's the scenario. You've got a daughter." I said, "She wants to go to college. She's African American and female. Those two things give her a step above a lot of people who are applying for college. Are you for affirmative action going away?" And I said, "Before you answer, you also want to start a business, and so do I. And your race means that you will probably get a little bit better preference
Mm-hmm.
for that $100,000 loan that only one of the two of us can get because of your race. Now, what's your answer?" And he's like, "Wow, I got to think about that for a little while."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "There you go. And these are the kind of things that tell me that these entitlements are ultimately more important to people than their
Then the
rights."
principle behind what they're
Right,
talking about. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
so I don't know. We've got to axe them, and like Sewell said, this
I like the way you said that. We gotta ask him.
we
Gonna
got
ask
well
him
we
a
got to
question.
axe the we got to act we got to axe the
Gotta ask him a
entitlements.
question.
No, we got to axe the
Yeah,
entitlements.
I know you. I know what you
Um,
meant.
but even like it kind of goes back to what Sewell says. You start axing entitlements, and then you're forcing this authoritarianism down people's throat, because that's how they'll see it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. There's
Yeah, they'll
there's
see it as
there's no way
taking
to.
away rights
Hmm?
instead of they'll see it as taking away rights instead of
Right,
taking away entitlements.
right,
That is just a privilege, right? Not a right.
right.
But see it as a right because they've always had it. It's always been there, quote unquote.
Hmm?
Or air quotes, I guess. So yeah, I mean,
I
they're
mean,
gonna fight for those, just like, but they're not gonna fight for the actual rights, and I don't know where that really comes from. I guess because rights require responsibility on the individual's part, entitlements do not. So I'm guessing that's where that would come from.
well, I would really like to see. I don't know. To be honest with you, I might actually be able to get a very young Gen Z she's kind of brilliant, even for a young teenager. Now I might be biased because I know her personally,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I need to understand how Gen Z sees the Constitution, how they see their Bill of Rights, what they see it as. I worry that the younger generations, and maybe you can speak to this somewhat. I think you fall into older millennial. What year were you born?
1990.
Yeah, so you fall into the right at the end of the older millennials. You were
Yeah.
the last generation to grow up offline, as it were. Um,
My first like 11 or 12 years were offline
yeah,
technically.
yes,
That was
that's
about it.
that's
After that,
that's
it
kind of
was,
what they consider the growing up, like because
I
Gen
guess,
Z,
yeah.
like the young Gen Z generation, they're growing up with the phone in their hand, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
have that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's technology inherent is what they're considered. It's just a
Right.
part of
But I mean,
their
I had a computer in my room since like I was probably 8 years old.
sure,
But I
right.
used it to play video games. That was,
Most boomers did.
yeah, boomers.
So now you made me lose my train of thought. I hope you're
Good.
happy.
A little bit.
No, so like I look at you and you understand your Constitution. Was that from school or was that from yourself?
That was from myself, and I wouldn't even say that I fully understand it. Like I
Well,
wouldn't go
right,
that
but
far. But
you've educated yourself on the Constitution. You
yeah,
understand what it's about. So I guess my real question to find out is, how does Gen Z see the Constitution? Like, do they actually, could anybody from Gen Z read the Constitution and like physically get past the Fourth Amendment without stopping for a moment and going, wait a minute? How do you teach that to kids in school that you have the right to privacy these days?
yeah. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
So I worry. I worry that the Constitution is it's got a timestamp on it. I would question whether or not Gen Z, which some people see might be our best hope at the moment, might be the generation that actually redoes the Constitution.
Mm. Yeah, I would not be okay with that. I would.
No, but we'll be dead
I
or
would be
close to
very
it.
skeptical.
Well, I
Probably
mean,
shortly after it got reworked
right, but
or
here,
gulagged.
but here's the argument to be made is this Bill of Rights isn't relevant. I mean, half of the Gen Z could say, well, right away, one of our rights is not even existent, so why is it there? There's a beginning argument for revamping the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, right?
Hmm.
I mean, wouldn't don't you want the fucking? I mean, we could get rid of the Patriot Act, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. Nobody
No, it's
that's
not going to
talked
happen.
about doing anything about it has ever done anything about it. So your right's not coming back anytime soon.
Right. But
Does
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not. If there was a reworked constitution, it would be completely unrecognizable from what it is now and from what it was originally to be meant to be. So I'm very wary of anyone trying to, redo the constitution. Just don't think it's a good idea.
well, in the face of rights being either gone or reworked enough to where they're not actually the rights they were once upon a time, doesn't it almost behoove us to go ahead and rework it, bring it to the present day? I mean, that's really it's. I think it's going to happen. It's got to happen.
I don't. No, I don't think it needs to happen. I think it might happen at some point, but I certainly wouldn't want it to happen. And I don't think it needs to happen. I think we just need to go back to those principles, to those very core
Well,
principles that set
you're
this nation up.
and that goes back to exactly what I said earlier, John. There's only one group that can make that happen
Yeah.
because Republicans won't do it, Democrats
No.
won't do it. It's only
No. Certainly not.
it's only the libertarian ideology that could bring about.
And yes, see, while we are watching the chat, we see you. We see everything you do.
Oh,
No
I am
further than
watching
you
it.
can
I know
check.
you want to make Midget be head of NASA and you want to be president for life, but I didn't think it was relevant to put it out there because I mean, we've already got Trump and he's going to be president for life. Well, wants to be, or
Right.
isn't adverse? He isn't adverse to the idea. Um,
But he'll be dead before Sewell is old enough to run for president, so we got time.
um, I mean, when it's all said and done, there's. I don't know that we have any way out of this without, you know, the older generations rising up to protect the Constitution, or the younger generations rising up to rewrite the Constitution. And both of those things wind up in a major battle.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't a civil war in effect. I don't know how there's another outcome. I don't know that without a libertarian in the White House. I mean, sad to say, but this particular problem, I think, can only be solved by a libertarian mindset, a libertarian idea in politics to address the balance that's needed between the generations.
But even with that, I mean, you'd have to have a libertarian Congress as well. And that would be even more difficult, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to have a strong libertarian takeover in Washington.
But to be fair, it could be the one thing that unites both Republicans and Democrats against libertarians.
Well, I believe Trump is probably going to replace Pence with Ivanka. Ivanka is going to be his VP for 2020. He's got to get her primed for 2024.
I don't think that's going to happen.
But. You watch. They want a dynasty, John. They want a dynasty. They've already laid out the path of who's going to run when. I'm just saying. Yeah, they are. You know he will. He wants to be president for life, and the way to do that is to have his kids in office after he's gone. I mean, come on.
See.
How much more 4D chess can you get?
Because it's too predictable. It's not Trump style to be that predictable.
In this one, yeah, it's
no. This is the one time.
this is the kind of thing. Yeah, you expect him to be a blowhard with North Korea. You expect him to be a blowhard when it comes to Brexit. You expect him to be a blowhard in these things, and he does it. He's kind of good at doing what you expect him to do. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't throw curveballs.
Yeah.
But we all sit around, and that's why we are at this point of complacency with Donald Trump in office, is we all sit around, does something crazy, and we're all like, should have seen that coming. Whoop, yeah. Not surprising. That's my Donald. I mean, he's totally predictable. You can expect him to do something, this is putting his children in the White House behind him. It's crazy talk. But that's why he'll do it, because he's just crazy enough to fucking do it.
I don't think so, but I guess we'll see.
Do you not watch anything about Ivanka? Do you not see how she's trying to play herself ready for that role? She is thoroughly working that shit. She is getting out there talking to world leaders, shaking hands, rubbing elbows. I mean, speaking at G20. Fucking speaking at G20. You don't even hold an office. You aren't nobody. You're just his daughter, his concubine. I mean, it's...
concubine.
That slipped out. I was thinking of a story I was reading earlier. I didn't mean that with this. Discipline. Now, Seawall says Junior and Eric have better shots. And I agree as far as Junior maybe having a better shot, but apparently they talked about it, and Ivanka thinks that she should run ahead of Junior, only because Junior fucked things up with the whole Trump campaign thing with the Trump Tower meeting and all of this. He kind of put himself in a bad spotlight, so he bumped himself from 2024 out to 2032.
Is that what you think?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like I said, we'll have to see. But I don't think
Trump Jr. kind of ruined his own credibility by getting in that meeting.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. Yeah, no, obviously I'm saying that he's going to be trying to run for president. I mean, we've seen how that worked out with, the Hillarys, the Clintons, and the Bushes as well.
No, the Bushes didn't do too bad with it. Jeb just couldn't pull the third. Jeb
was not a good choice. They should have chosen the dog or something. I don't know.
But I'm telling you,
the family dog.
Donald and Ivanka are just like this. Sometimes they're like this, but most of the time they're like this. He's grooming her, and I can guarantee you. Now, he may not make her his running mate for 2020.
No.
But he's grooming her for 2024. She will run. Watch.
I don't know.
I've
We'll
made the
see.
prediction, folks. If I'm wrong,
You have.
then
It's all
I will
it's
lose
all on the
my
record
I
too.
will lose my Nostradamus status.
Nose Stradamus.
Right there, it is. Do you see it?
Yep.
So, John, all right. So I've thrown all this shit in a blender. I've thrown my 2 cents in. And I threw in a little bit of orange juice and some carrots for sweetness. Now, you tell me,
Mm-hmm.
how do we blend this up and make it a palatable drink? Besides attacking the culture, because I mean, I'm telling you, John, the culture, going at it from a cultural standpoint, is going to take more than your lifetime has left in it to see any change. There's got to be a better way to make an impact now that starts us transitioning.
I mean, other than no, I mean, because obviously, I'm not going to advocate violence, but that would be probably the only way that could. So without violence, I don't think that there's a real way we could do it like immediately. And even then, I think that would be a terrible idea because obviously that just puts people off of your message if you start enacting violence, which again is why people are leaving the left, which is why the left is eating itself. It's because they're advocating violence and it's making them look like fools.
I mean, the
So
cult. Oh, go ahead.
I just no. I was just gonna say. So I mean, other than culture, I don't know. I don't really have any real answers for that. I think culture is the most important part.
Because there is another way
And
this plays out.
okay,
Because the other way it plays out is this: you've got our culture, our present day culture, which is as crazy and screwed up as it is, with this vocal minority and the spread of this SJW mindset. Um, it's causing a lot of division in the country, and it's causing a lot
yeah,
of people to act out in this country. I also fully believe that one of the options is we're on the precipice of seeing enactment of a police state in this country. Getting
yeah,
it closer to a police state or moving into a police state, especially if it starts happening on a smaller scale, like if it starts happening at the state level, cities, municipalities start locking themselves down in response to these kind of actions and outbursts that go on. Even so far as, yes, to address, something that Midget B was talking about last week, yes, even going so far as to lock down areas where there's high crime and, and violence, things like this, take, inner city areas, things like this, where the police take a stronger level of authoritarianism, and they start being backed up by their local and state governments,
hmm
and it eventually feeds up to the federal government, where the easiest way to stop this nasty shit that's happening in our culture is to lock it down.
right. Violence. That's
Well,
what I was talking about.
I mean,
Violence in
but our
general.
country, it could it, you well it would cause some violence, but is it
No,
small
the only way
scale
to
enough?
enforce it, the only way to enforce it is through violence. I mean, that's why anything the state does it has an implied violence to it. Because in order to enforce any kind of law or any kind of regulation, it requires violence, or at least the threat of violence.
Well, Seawall made a good point, and I'm gonna say this again. This is the primary reason why I talk about Andrew Yang and the UBI.
hmm
A UBI, like he talks about, would go a long way to quote I'll put quotes around it, forcing good old fashioned home values in the home again. Not necessarily ramming it down people's throat, but that will inherently
Given the
happen if
option.
people are comfortable with the money they're making, right?
hmm
If they have a home life that can support a parent at home while one goes out and works, and raise our children at home again. Um, I mean, yes, that I understand that in a sense is also, is basically saying, going the cultural route. Um, but I do see a difference in culture from the culture of, you know, good family values versus the culture of the internet telling me how to think, social media being raised everywhere but at home. There's a
Mhm.
difference in that cultural aspect. Um, I mean, I don't want to get full on socialists in this country, but
But
however, that is a
yeah.
peaceful, potentially peaceful way to
Um,
enact change in the culture.
I mean, so I see some problems with that from the perspective of the left when it comes to that. One thing they're always pushing is, equality. Well, so yes, while it would be technically equal because everyone is getting the same amount, but that's not what they mean by equality,
Sure.
right? So what is not going to be closing the wage gap or anything like that. It's just going to be moving it down the line a little bit where everyone's making X amount of money, and then you also have your personal income on top of that,
Sure.
right? So that's going to be a huge problem, right? That's not going to quell any kind of feminist views or
Well,
anything like that. And
well,
going
there.
back to the feminist views, though, when we talk about like a stay-at-home mom getting paid, $12,000, she can stay home while the husband goes out and works. But when it comes to like feminist theory, it's us versus them, right? It's women versus men. It's if you want to go intersectional, it's white people versus people of
Right.
color, or people of color versus white people, gay versus straight. All these different intersectionalities. And so when you say, okay, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom and I'm getting 12,000, well, my husband is getting 12,000 plus personal income. Well, I need to be getting personal income because he's making more than me. Therefore, he's got power over me. X, Y, and Z. It's not as from that perspective. Is what I'm saying. It's not going to work from that perspective to quell these kind of cultural schisms that we have at the moment. And like I said, especially coming from the left.
Well, I can I can see the perspective you're coming from. Um,
And again, it's not my beliefs, right?
right.
This is the yeah.
I understand what you're saying. The argument there, to a certain extent, is that um, a there the UBI is a great equalizer. So when we look at the isms for a minute, right? So inherently it says that you, Joe white supremacist, and and Joe urban city African American, we now see an equal value between the two of you. Like, you inherently are worth something, right? We've in that psychological way, we've attached a monetary value to all citizens 18 and above as equal, right? So we have that. We've got the psychological impact of that
Mhm.
helps with
I
some
mean,
of the
it's you.
isms,
You would hope that would be the message that comes across, but
right?
like I said, there's a whole other interpretation that
Sure,
allows
sure,
certain ideology to continue operating.
sure. Um,
And which it requires that
now,
to do.
now, if a woman, like you were talking about feminists, one of the issues that, like traditionally, that women who stay at home and raise the kids, and I'm going to go ahead and
Hmm.
say now in the present day, whichever parent stays at home and raises the kids is completely the underdog in the situation because
Yeah.
they make no money, right?
Hmm.
So, whichever way it is, because I can promise you, as after having been a stay-at-home parent for almost a decade, yeah, that feeling of power and oppression that comes from the person making the money in the household is palpable. I mean, it's there.
Hmm.
You feel it.
Yeah.
So it's not just a feminism thing, because now it's beginning to
Sure.
equalize out because men are feeling the pain too. But with $1,000 coming in, well, now again, psychologically, you've established a value for what they're doing, right? You can't
Hmm.
be a guy that comes home and go, you just sit around all day and sit around watch TV with the kids and you don't do shit. You don't get paid for it. You don't do anything. You don't. Well, now she's bringing in a thing. You can't argue that she's not bringing something in, that he's not bringing
Right,
in, right?
but she's not
And
right.
it's not that, well, in it, right. I get what you're
You know what I
saying.
mean?
You're
Like,
not going
yeah,
out
it's
and
not
busting
really.
a hump, right? But,
Yeah, because he's
you know,
bringing in the same thing plus more. You know,
This,
you see what I mean? Like
I think there would
that's going to cause more divorces, if anything. You know.
see. I would imagine that there would be plenty of people out there that go, I don't have to go out and bust my hump. Now I have some value
Hmm.
coming in for what I'm doing. For the busting my hump, I've already done. And, you know, there are going to be the psychological impact to the other parent who is working that says in their mind, okay, now this job that she does, that he does, has value. I think that there wouldn't be as widespread um, disenfranchisement as you think, because again, it becomes an equalizer amongst everyone. It places no additional value on anybody else. The only
Right.
additional value, and quite honestly, if two people are in a household and one's working and the other's not, but they're both getting a UBI, then fine. You want to feel like you're, fine. You go get the job. I'll stay at home. We've got the base income for that to happen. We'll still have the
Yeah.
2,000 coming in. Fine. I'll quit my fucking job that I hate, and you go get one. Go. And they can
Yeah.
make that trade off. You can inherently come to that. Go fucking get a job then. If you feel like I'm holding power over you because I've got the job, go get your own, and I'll stay at home because we can afford to do that now and raise our
Hopefully,
kids.
hopefully you could
Right?
afford to do that.
Um, you know, Surprisingly enough, money is a great problem solver for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And a distraction. Having some extra money is a distraction that makes you not look at those little ism things as much.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I
No,
mean,
it is a huge cause of divorce. Is financial issues.
absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
And I mean, look at minority communities. I mean, how much more equal are they going to feel when they are receiving something at the same level as everybody else? I mean, you cannot tell me that's not equality. How you spend that money and how much you've got at the end of the week, at the end of the month, that's up to you, right?
Hmm.
They'll understand that it's inherently on them.
Are you talking
If
about personal responsibility?
yes,
Do you have any idea
this
how wrong that is? No, it's the
it
state's responsibility,
it's
not
a
the person, not the individual.
well, see
Come
there
on.
there and now you
Yeah,
say something
exactly.
like that, but I see that kind of mindset in the younger generations, and you
I,
guys
I'm
want to
being
tell me that.
sarcastic, but it is a
Right,
real,
right.
it is a
And
real mindset.
you tell me Gen Z
100%.
might be our only hope. And I'm like, but there's that mindset amongst much of the
Didn't say
younger
there was a
generations.
great hope, but it was,
better
it is
than
a hope.
better than a sharp stick in the eye.
Better than the millennials for sure.
Oh God, you guys would fuck things up. Um, I don't want to live my older years with you guys in charge. It's already scary enough thinking that it's gonna and
Yeah,
knowing
think
that it's
about it.
gonna happen.
You're gonna have a millennial changing your diapers. Just letting
No,
you know.
no, I'm just gonna poop my pants. um, so yeah, it's we individual accountability is a brick in the foundation of the pyramid of white supremacy. Woo!
Yeah,
Whatever.
it's true.
Uh,
No, I mean that's yeah, that's a real thing. That
no,
that
I get that.
that's
Yeah,
a yeah,
yes. Um,
and it's so unfortunate because like that's how we talked about this on Monday with rhetoric. That's a way of we talked about ethos, and that's a way of attacking the ethos, but saying oh you're just spewing white supremacist talking points, and therefore I can just dismiss everything you say,
right.
even though individual accountability is probably the most important thing in someone's life.
Well,
But
individual accountability is something everybody has to deal with, but most people, a lot of people ignore it.
hmm
I think it's a little more widespread in the younger generations. There's a lot more victim mentality in the younger generations, which is actually kind of seeping into the older generations. It's kind of like having a backwards flow effect. Instead of being passed
hmm
down to the generation below, it's bleeding upwards into later generations, or strengthening the minuscule mindset that was already building, however you want to look at it. This victim mentality in this country, somebody's to blame, somebody's to blame, somebody's to blame for all my woes. Well, guess what? The generation before you, the 2 generations before you, will always be to blame for your fucking woes. I don't care what you
Yes.
think. They laid the path that you have to rework and follow. One of those 2 things. You have to make your choice. You either follow the path or you change it.
Yeah,
And maybe
exactly.
Gen Z will. I would say that I think that the UBI would go a long way to doing that for Gen Z, to cement the values that they have and the things that they're rebelling against, like SJWs and this insane mindset. But it might also be the entitlement that removes the need for other entitlements. Right? That kind of moves them away from an entitled mindset. It's like, okay, boom, here it is, cut and dried and simple. Here's $1,000 that I'm worth as a person.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, what do I want to fix? What needs fixing? Right? Then we can focus on things like, I don't know, the rights you're losing or have lost. Maybe it re-energizes their focus in that way. I'm not saying it's a perfect idea. I'm just saying this is, it's got a
Yeah.
lot of merit in potentially doing that cultural shift that you talk about, because family values goes a long way in this country, or it used to, if it's done
Yeah.
right.
Well, if it's done right, yeah, it can certainly make your life a lot easier. But with that, I think we should head out. It's
We're
10:30
right on
now.
time. We haven't gone on for a
Yeah,
while. We're
look at
right
that.
on time. What the hell's
Yeah,
wrong with
man.
Midget B?
I don't know. He's always bitching about
Why does
something.
he always want to be somebody's mother?
He's just snowflaking all over our chat right now.
Right? You know what? Shut us down, Midget. Go ahead. End the show.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
go
Show us
ahead.
what you got, bitch. Come on, bro. Come at me. No,
Right?
hey, John, before we get out of here, we should throw out a couple of reminders about something.
Yes,
What?
yes, we should. Yes, Friday, August 30th, we are having Blonde from Beauty and the Beta podcast and Blonde in the Belly and of the Beast. Um, so that'll be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that. Make sure you're there for that. Uh, then Halloween, we're doing our Halloween Spooktacular. We'll have some more details on that. Um, find him in the description, cunts. He's leading us out.
We haven't
So yeah,
even got to
Halloween.
that part yet. Slow down.
Yeah, and yeah, so Halloween, we're planning on doing something special for that. I'm pretty excited about it. Robert's scared, so it should be fun. um, and then Friday, December 6th, we have our 12-hour live stream for
Live
charity.
chat.
Live charity, yeah, we're gonna be no, charity is a local stripper that we hang out. But no, 12-hour live stream for charity, so we can hopefully give some toys to some needy children who wouldn't have any otherwise, so at least they can have a good Christmas as well. And so that'll be a lot of fun. We're gonna get our Freedom Scoop group together, and I love saying that. And yeah, I'm trying to get some other guests on, and think of some activities. We plan on having 2 debates. I don't know how well that's gonna work yet. We haven't really talked too much about it. So it should be a lot of fun. We're gonna have, yeah, like I said, lots of activities.
Yeah, the Halloween one scares me a little because I keep envisioning this haunted house with nothing but pictures of you without your beard scattered throughout.
Yeah, that'd be pretty awesome.
That'd be
We should do
fucking
that.
scary as hell, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
You could sell
sounds good.
tickets to that scary thing. Hey, John, before we get out of here, would you agree with me that our listening audience and anybody who watches this show, do a good deed and give a copy of the Constitution to any Gen Z that you see. Give them a copy of the Constitution and make sure they start learning it. They need to understand it.
I would say just start with the Bill of Rights and just
Well, yeah, the
kind of
Constitution's a
give
lot
them
of
that.
reading, right?
It's not even that much reading. It is. It's not
It's
an easy
not. It's
read.
not.
It's not an
Well,
easy read though.
well,
But
who wants your rights
if
to
you're
be
not
easy?
right,
So, folks, if you like what you're hearing, hit the like button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. 2 clicks makes everybody happy. Tell a friend, tell your family, tell somebody, get them on here. Let's keep this conversation going. John, if they want to
yeah.
keep the conversation going, do they have avenues to do that?
Yes, yes, they do. Um, Obviously, as well as subscribing and being active in our chat, you can hit us up on Twitter at the Gen Gap P. Link is also down there. And also, while you're down there following us on Twitter, you can find our Discord server link down there. And that'll bring you to the Generational Gap Discord server, the best Discord server the internet has to offer. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. You can talk to the friendly and
Not so
I
friendly.
don't know, not so friendly people. And I was trying to think of a nice word to say, and not so friendly in the Discord server, so that'll be fun. And you can also find us at freedomscoop.com, which I think we've mentioned a couple times already.
Yeah, I've
So
heard
go check
rumors.
that out
All right, we're going to get
for
the hell out
sure.
of here, folks. We'll be back again to
Yeah.
see you Monday night for our Shooting the Shit episode at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And then, of course, we'll
Yup.
be back next Friday at our regular time at 8:30 Eastern Time for another rousing episode of something. Wait, what's today? Today is the 16th, so we still have 2 weeks till Blonde. So we have
Yep.
one more week of just our normal pedantic
Of
bullshit.
just us.
Just
Ew.
us.
Gross.
Just the pretty one and John.
Yep.
So we're going to get the hell out of here. Thanks for listening, folks. Have yourselves a good night. And remember, bye.
Yes, there you go.